for being here. And yes, what an intriguing topic. This came up sort of after yesterday. We did our live YouTube show, and it was quite interesting because we I don't know if you know, some people listening might never have watched that show. So what it is basically we go live on YouTube and we have a chat room and people click on the chat room, and that enables you to get in there and ask live questions, should I say live, which we then answer live. Is there somebody there, Alan? You're having a or how are you having
I am instructing my children in the background. Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Anyway, it is live. It's a live show.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's an intrigue. So we do this every Thursday morning, and it's live, and you can go into the chat room. You just click on the bottom right corner of your iPad or your computer or whatever it is you're using, and it takes you right into our chat room where people can ask questions. It's live, and Al and Carolyn sort of field the questions to me, and I answer the live questions, and we have a lot of fun doing it. We get some great questions, and I like to think I give some great answers as well. But somebody on the show, I'm not quite sure how the question was put, but someone on the show actually mentioned something about, destiny and can you see the future and so on and so forth. And so we teased a little bit on the show yesterday, and I promised that we would have this discussion this evening on our Everything is Attitude show, because although we're talking about perhaps the future or destiny or whatever, well, what does that have to do with attitude anyway? But everything, this is why we mentioned, we named this show everything about life is attitude. So the space in between is basically that space between the time we are born. I'm not sure if it's actually prior to the time that we're born, so I'm sort of going to go for that a little bit. But from the time that we're born to the time that we die, I hate using the word die because nobody really dies, do they? But from the time we're born to the time we pass out of this world and into the next, there's that space in between. Now, for some of us, that space can be very short period of time, and for some of us it can be a very long period of time. Some of us live to the ripe old age of 90 or even 100 and something. So that space varies depending on how long we live, and that space is basically about our attitude throughout that lifespan that we have, and how our attitude can affect even the future. So is it fortune telling? Is it destiny? How much of a choice, I'm sort of posing all these questions here, Al, how much of a choice do we actually really have in the decision making of our life? Or are we simply merely in that space in between? Are we merely puppets? Is there someone or something, a god or a god force or some sort of an energy or whatever you want to call it out there? I laugh when I mention the word God. I do believe that there is a God or God force, but I always say to people, don't get hung on that word God, because God is only dog spelled backwards. Not that I don't love my dog either, but whether you believe in a God, whether you believe in God force, an energy or universal energy, a power, or whatever it is out there, there is certainly something that does control the planet. Even if it's only the atmospheric stuff that's going on, there is something out there, I believe, that oversees and overlooks or watches us. Is that, whatever that something is, whether you call it a God or whatever, is that something controlling us? Are we merely puppets playing out this dance, this space in between? Are we simply dancing through this space in between to somebody else's tune? Have they already decided on the experiences that we're going to have? and even the next experience and the next experience? Or is there any leeway in there for choice, for instance? Or, you know, what's going on? Al, what do you think is? we've had quite a long conversation this afternoon on the phone talking about this topic, because I think it's fair to say, Al, you're intrigued, as so many other people are, and want answers, and you're looking to me to give you those answers. The conversation that we had this afternoon, we should have recorded it.
We should have, yeah.
Because then we didn't need to be here tonight. We would have just played the recording.
Put it up there, yeah.
But we did have a great conversation about this, didn't we?
We did, yeah. We talked about some of the things you've mentioned. You know, what is sort of predestined, predetermined? What do you have choice in? Even when it is predetermined, we mentioned that you have choice in how you react to those things that are predetermined as well, right?
Yeah, responses and reactions, which is, you know, bottom line, your attitude, because everything is attitude. Okay, so I remember, I mean, I've had so many conversations about this with so many people, but particularly, of course, most importantly, with my spirit guide, Grey Eagle, who can really, it has really educated me in this. But when I first sort of came into working as I do now, and sort of meeting people and giving people consultations, for instance, I mean, most people who call me and have a consultation with me at some point, I mean, we hope that they're calling me because they want to connect with their loved ones. Having connected with their loved ones, having discovered that they're okay, now we come to the humanness of the consultation, which is, what about me? And, you know, am I going to, I mean, the questions range from, am I going to meet someone? Will I be happy? You know, all sorts of questions about the future that people look to me because they think that I can answer these questions. And for the most part, I can, which then says that there must be things that are ordained. And there are people out there like myself who do believe that at least some of the future, if not all of it, is, you know, is destined to happen. Now, as I say, when I first sort of came into this work and doing all of this, you know, I didn't like the idea of not having control. After all, I'm an earth sign. I like to plan. I like to strategize. I like to be in control of what I'm doing with my life. Even though I know that when I plan things, I'm fully aware that God is thinking, oh yeah, well, we'll see about that one. Still, I do feel that I have to, you know, that's my way. I'm an earth sign, and I do feel that I need to have a plan of some kind, even if I'm happy to deviate from the plan. But the idea of, for me, of being a puppet, of somebody else pulling the strings, and I'm not only taking actions that were decided 5 minutes before or 10 minutes before that I would take, but not just the actions, but the words themselves, because words are very powerful, as you know. So I didn't like this idea of thinking, you know, that we don't have a choice. So, of course, I fought against it, as wouldn't anybody. I didn't like that idea, so I fought against it, and I said to Grey Eagle many times, well, I don't like that, and I don't like the idea of not having choices and so on. However, I mean, I've been doing my kind of work, weird kind of work, yes, I'll agree, but I've been doing this work for, I counted up this morning, it's almost 40 years. It's 39 years that I began on a professional basis doing this work. It's almost 40 years. And through that 40 years, I feel so old, and thank God I don't look too haggard. But the more that I've done it, and the more messages I've given to people, and the more experiences that I personally have had, and the more experiences I've had through other people, the more I realize how very much of our lives is destined. I believe in that space in between, that we are destined to meet certain people. We are destined even to have certain illnesses, not all, but certain things will happen to us on a physical level. We will have certain struggles that we are meant to face and deal with. We are destined to have relationships with, obviously, with our parents, with our loved ones, with our future spouse. I mean, one of the questions I'm asked so often by people is, am I going to meet somebody? I'm going to, in other words, am I going to meet the love of my life? Will the love of my life appear? And I want to say to people, do you think I'm psychic? And oh, well, yes, of course I am. So I look and I do see, and I can see into next week. I can see 20 years from now, if that is what that person needs. And I'm not the one who decides what that person needs to hear. Grey Eagle is the one who decides what that person needs to hear and if it will benefit them or not. But I did struggle with this idea of, I don't want to be a puppet. I want to own my own life, and I want to own my own decisions, and so on. I mean, how do you feel about being a puppet, Al? Does that appeal to you?
Most definitely not. We talked earlier about this, like we mentioned. And the first thing that came to my mind was it's kind of depressing if that's the case, right? But
it is for me.
Yeah, but you know, as we continue to have the conversation, just so our audience knows, we talked about, you know, these things are predetermined, whatever it may be, right? But the in between, that space in between, is not just like between birth and death, right? It's kind of the between what you're predetermined or predestined to have in your life and how you respond to that. You used me for an example. Coming out to Colorado, I left a good amount behind in Colorado and on Long Island. And I have a choice.
Long Island is New York City, by the way.
Most people know Long Island, but yeah, Long Island's in New York, exactly. So maybe abroad people don't know that, but Long Island's pretty popular. So you know, when I came out to Colorado, you mentioned it was predetermined. I was definitely coming out to Colorado, but I have a choice.
We're definitely moving.
Definitely moving, yeah. So I have a choice whether to harp on what I left behind on Long Island or embrace being out here and the opportunity that's out here. So I could spend my whole life harping on what I left behind, or
regretting
or embracing.
Or embracing. Yeah,
exactly. Which I've done here and there. Like, I don't think I've done it consistently, but I've done the regret thing. For the most part, I'm embracing, but I think that's what everything is attitude about. You have to almost train yourself to respond in a positive way to whatever comes your way or whatever is sort of predetermined for you. You have to respond in a positive way to that versus, you know, harping on things that are negative or things that you can't control. Or whatever.
I think I gave you the example, which I hope we're not losing people in this conversation. I hope people are following. So I'm going to simplify things a little bit in what you just said. I had a client many years ago, actually, and she was in her late 60s or early 70s. She'd been married for, I would say, 50 years. And her purpose of coming to see me was for me to tell her the future. Now, at late 60s, early 70s, you know, there's quite a bit of future left, we hope. But is it a bit late to be wondering about the future when you're this age? So anyway, I you know, listened to her. I said to her, well, why do you want to know the future? She said, well, really, she said, the only thing I really want to know is, when is my husband going to die? This is a true story I'm telling you now. This is a true story. And it turned out, I won't give too many ins and outs of all of this, but it turned out that this woman had had a boyfriend prior to her husband coming along. Whether the previous boyfriend had actually asked her to get married or not, I never found out. I have no idea. But she married this guy because, first of all, he had, you know, a bit of money, he had a good job, he was safe and secure, and so on and so forth. But over the years, she, you know, she regretted that decision. She regretted marrying him, not because, well, not because she didn't love him. She didn't love him, but she regretted the decision because she thought, for whatever reason in her mind, that he would die and she would be left very comfortably off as a widow. Unfortunately, he didn't die soon enough. And here she is at late 60s, early 70s, and her husband is still alive, right? And she's still at this age. Well, how much longer do I have to wait? Now, I think at some point in the past, when she was young, she must have gone to a fortune teller, and I use that term loosely. She must have gone to a fortune teller who said to her, you'll be married, but you'll be widowed young. So she'd been hanging on to this for 50 years. Now, okay, in this 50 years, she had a choice. She could have embraced her husband and thought to herself, well, even if he only lives for 10 years or so, I'm going to make the most of that. We're going to have a great life. I'm going to make the most of it. And whoopee, when he dies, I'll have his comfortable house and comfortable life and, you know, so on. Or she, you know, sort of as time went on, this is what she did. She began to resent. She began to get angry. She began to resent the fact that she was stuck in this marriage. Dare I even say, she began to resent that he was still alive at 71 or 72 years of age. So she had a choice. She could have embraced it and said, look, this is my decision. I'm going to make the very best of it. And for as long as he lives, short time or not, I'm going to make him happy. I'm going to make us happy. Or she did exactly what she did. She sort of, you know, counting the clock, watching the clock, how much longer, how much longer. And any little thing that happened in that marriage, she blew it up. Any negative thing that happened, she blew it up and gave herself more and more reasons to regret, to be angry, to be frustrated. And the worst thing, she's telling me all this stuff. And by this time, of course, she is not only in her late 60s or early 70s, she's a really bitter and miserable and has become a really mean person because she's lived 50 years because somebody told her years ago, you know, you'll be a widow when you're young, and she believed it. Well, what happened there? And she resented it and she was bitter. She had choices. The inevitability was that she met this man. The inevitability was probably likely that she married him. So in that space in between, she has these inevitabilities. But her choice as to what to do with that marriage, to what to do with that relationship, is down to her. So we come across, not everything in that space in between. Let me be clear, not everything is preordained. Otherwise, we simply would be puppets, and I wouldn't see the point in that. But there are things that we are preordained, and there are things that we have choices about. I discover more and more that we have less and less choice than I would like, but we always have the choice of how we're going to deal with the things that come at us, good or bad. We have a choice as to how to deal with those things, and very often our choice determines our next preordained situation and how we're going to handle that. Are we going to be happy about it? Are we going to embrace it and feel good about it, or what? So even though life is preordained in so many aspects, we still have our choices. I'm hoping. I know we do. I know we do.
We also talked about, what your soul says to you too, right, Rosemary, to guide you in those choices
Well,
to
why
get.
don't you talk? Why don't you talk about, the feelings and the sense? Excuse me, the feelings and the sensitivity that you have. I hope I'm not going to start coughing again. But go on. Why don't you talk about that, and I'll see if I can explain a little bit about that too.
So with myself, I've always felt that I want to or can do something on a grander scale. What that grander scale is, I don't know yet, but something bigger, something worldly. I've felt that for most of my life. And I spoke to you about that earlier, and
I think your question to me was, is that because I sense that it's preordained, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was just going to say. So is that, when I asked you, is that, when I forget the wording we use, but a calling, right? I think I used it. Is that you people hear a calling, or
they have
pull.
a calling to become a priest, or they have a calling to become a nurse or something.
Exactly, exactly. And I asked what that is, and you said, "What? Do you remember what you said?"
Yeah, well, I remember what I said, because what I said is right.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is simple information. So I talk to people a lot about the soul, and one of the first things I ask my students is, can you tell me where it is? Where do you think your soul resides? And some people say the heart, and some people say the head. Some people say resides outside of us. Lots of people have lots of ideas of where the soul resides. And I tell my students it doesn't matter where it resides, as long as it resides. And then you have to learn to listen to your soul. And I encourage people to listen to the heartbeat of your soul. Does the soul really have a heartbeat? Absolutely, yes, it does. Is it a living thing? Absolutely, yes, it does. Our soul is our soul is us. Now, when you're a sensitive person, as you are, Al, and you do listen and you do sense things, and you do have this sort of extra thing that goes on with those of us who are sensitive, but you automatically can connect with your soul. And when your soul speaks to you, it's almost as if it's like, it's if you can imagine that it's a whisper coming through a long tunnel, and you can hear that whisper, and that whisper sort of somehow gets in your head or within your hearing or wherever it gets, and you hear that whisper, and or you have a sense of what not necessarily even words, but you have a sense of what your soul is trying to tell you, sort of coming from that long tunnel there. And your soul often will say to you, and in your case, your soul is saying, you can do more. You can be more. Let go of your fear. Let go of the fear of, this humanness that we have. Of course, we all live with the fear of not being successful. We live with the fear of trying and failing. Human beings have a lot of fear within us, but your soul, when your soul calls out to you in this way, it's basically saying to you, you can do more, extend yourself. It's encouraging you to be more of who you can be and more of who you are. Extend yourself, stretch yourself, reach out there. And so, so when I explain that to you, that makes sense to you, right?
Yeah, and I think as you're saying this too, I think a lot of angst or anxiety comes when you either ignore your soul, what your soul is telling you, or you don't go towards that, or aren't pulled towards some people say what your heart is telling you, or what your soul is telling you, or what your calling is. When you ignore that, and yes, you have to be responsible and rational and make sure, like, your family provides.
You have to apply common sense after
Exactly. You can't just say, I have a
okay, then I'm off.
and I'm off. Exactly. But over the long haul, if your soul is telling you or pulling you towards a certain way, you can. We talked about discipline and action. Be disciplined to take action on a daily basis to get towards that, and just moving towards what your soul is telling you feels more right because you're becoming more in line with what your soul is telling you.
When you say people do, and people do say, listen to your heart or listen to your instincts.
Yeah.
Sometimes those instincts or that listening to your heart comes from those in the spirit world who love you and are whispering in your ear and trying to guide you and steer you. But very often those instincts within you are your soul speaking to you. As I've said, sort of like down a long tunnel there, your soul is encouraging you to be, you know, we're here to learn and to grow. But if all we do is, you know, have a lousy attitude and sit at our desk and not even try, then we're not going to get the full experience of this life of ours. So the soul, the instincts or listening to your heart or the voice or the heartbeat of the soul, when it calls to you, if you can be brave enough, it's not easy, but if you can be brave enough to learn to listen and have a positive attitude and say, you know what, I'm going to try. It doesn't matter if I fail, I fail. But if I don't try, you know, it's like people say, I never win the lottery. I never win anything. Well, no, well, you don't, because you never buy a lottery ticket. You know, so with the soul, and the soul is calling, or your instincts are telling you something, your soul is speaking to you. If you don't try at least to achieve and attain something beyond what it is you're doing right in this moment, then you are going to fail. You're going to fail because you never bought the lottery ticket. So it's inevitable. You're never going to win anything.
And the human side takes over, like you said, the fear piece takes over, the human side, the what if something goes wrong. But what I think happens too, like what if you do, it's your choice. You can ignore what your soul is telling you, right? But people talk, we had somebody talk about things were out of alignment and they didn't think anything was working the way they should. Well, that's when things are out of alignment, right? When you're ignoring
your soul, you're ignoring your instincts, you're ignoring your sensitivity, because if you pay attention to it, that might just mean that you have to have a change of attitude. I mean, I laugh at all these people who, you know, we get some rude comments on YouTube and so on sometimes, and I laugh at these people because you know, so many of them are so set in, you know, there's nothing there. This is absolute, whatever they say, you know, it's rubbish or what have you. And so many of these people are so afraid to ask the question, what if? I'm not saying people should dive in and believe it all, but a normal, rational, educated person would at least say, but what if? But what if what she says is right? What if what they say is, what if there's something in it? It might not be what she says, but what? And people are so afraid to ask that question because it means that if they ask the question, they're going to have to change their way of thinking. And, you know, I mean, there is so much evidence. Of course, you know, people say to me, prove it. Go away. I don't need to prove it to you.
Or prove otherwise, right? Rosemary, prove the other way too. You could say either one.
Yeah, prove it. Prove it, you know. But I mean, you just get into nonsensical arguments in that way. But we were talking about this destiny thing, and is everything destiny, and how does it work? And if I knew how it worked, I'd be making millions. But I personally have had so many experiences that would blow your mind. For instance, I'm going to recount a couple. I'm going to recount 2 or 3. And people believe it or they don't believe it, and whatever. These are my experiences. So when my daughter was about 10 or 12 years old, something like that, I was invited to a party, and so I drove 2 hours. I dropped my daughter off at my sister's house, and she was going to stay with my sister for the night, and then I was going to go across the city. Leicester is a big city. And I was at this side of the city, and I had to cross the city in rush hour traffic, I might tell you, and get to the other side of the city to get to this party. And it was an important party, and, you know, I needed to go. So I'm just on my way out the door, and my daughter says, and I'm running late, my daughter says to me, "Mummy, I can see you sitting at a traffic lights and the car's broken down, don't go." And I said, "Oh," and I was late and I was rushing. Of all the people not to pay attention, really. So what do? Oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine.
Rosemary, as you're saying that, I know people that do that too, and late and rushing is distraction from what your soul is telling you, right? That's right. Really what it is. Yeah.
But at the same time, if I had taken it to heart, would anything have changed? I don't know. Anyway, I get in the car and I drive all the way across the city in crazy rush hour traffic, and I come to a traffic light. I'm now on the other side of the city and just about to come out into the city, into the countryside, so I'm home free. So I come to the traffic light and it's red, and I put my brake on and I get to the traffic light. I'm the first one there, and boiling hot water gushes into the car, and my alternator falls off. And of course, I'm now stuck at the traffic lights, broken down. My daughter has seen it and described it in detail. What she didn't describe was there was a phone box. Luckily for me, there was a phone box across the street. I had to cross 3 lanes, 3 this side, 3 the other side, so 6 lanes of traffic. I was sitting at the traffic light, everybody's honking when it turned green and so on. So it's a bit of a crazy situation. I end up in the phone box calling my friend to tell her, and this fabulous group of Hare Krishnas, I don't know if anybody knows what the Hare Krishnas are, but they have this beautiful religious belief, or well, I shouldn't say religious, spiritual belief. Anyway, they're all in their robes and they're going around and around the phone box. They see me in the phone box and they're singing, "Krishna, Hare Krishna." Trying to get someone to come and help me. And my car's across the other side of the road in the main city centre. And anyway, so my daughter saw that very clearly. Now reverse it, right? What as a mother do you do, or a parent, what as a parent do you do? Your daughter calls you. Her boyfriend has had a severe accident and she has to go to him right away. She's 18 years old. She's in a car that I bought her, which, you know, it was an old Russian car, but extremely sturdy, thank goodness, which is why I got it for her. Anyway, and as she's talking to me, I see really clearly, like a film or a video playing in front of you. I see her. The car wheel spins on some oil, and the car takes a nosedive into a ditch, and the car literally is crushed from one end to the other. It's sort of concertinas up like this. She's with a friend, and I see all of this, and what do? So I say to her, "Listen, I knew if I said she couldn't go, I knew she would go. So I said to her, I want you to drive really carefully, really steadily. Please do not speed." I knew that she'd be okay, but at the same time, it's a trauma about to happen. And within, I'm going to say, same as Samantha, when Samantha told me about the traffic lights, it was like half an hour, 40 minutes later, and there I was, just like she'd seen it. And here she was 2 hours later. And I sat by the phone and I told my friends came and sat with me, and I was sort of chewing my nails, because what if I hadn't quite seen it right? What if she had been hurt in that accident? And I sat by the phone until like 1 o'clock in the morning, when they finally sort of sorted themselves out and so on and so forth. And she called me, and the first thing she said to me was, "Mum, I'm okay. But I know you saw that, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, you were in a ditch, right?" And she confirmed. I mean, what is that? That's destiny. It was meant to happen. I know that people are listening to this story thinking, well, why didn't you tell her she couldn't go? Or why didn't you tell her about the accident? Well, if I'd have told her she couldn't go, she would have gone anyway. If I'd have told her about the accident, maybe I would have put it in her head. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you say something to someone and then it happens. Is it the power of suggestion?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I daren't tell her. I dare not say that to her. So I just said to her, just be really, really cautious, which fortunately she was. And then I'm going to tell you this third story, and then you can give me your opinion on all of this, Al, because it's very weird. We're talking about that, you know, the space between. Okay, I had a very good friend of mine who was also a student, and she came to class, and as she was talking, I saw her, and I saw her car. I knew it very well. I saw her car parked by the side of the road with a flat tire. She was going, that was a Friday night. The next couple of days later, she was going to visit her daughter-in-law, which was a good 2 or 3 hour drive. And my friend drove fast. So I told her what I'd seen, exactly what I'd seen. And her husband was a car mechanic, and his son was a car mechanic. So they went over that car with a fine-tooth comb, and they checked all the tires, and they checked the pressure, they did everything. She called me, she said, they can't find anything wrong. And I said, well, please just, even if it takes you longer, please just go slow. So 3 hours later, this is a few days after this, 3 hours, you know, she drove down 3 hours, nothing. Everything was fine. But I was fine. And she called me, she said, we're fine, everything is fine. I've got here, we're both safe. I said, that's okay then. I did not doubt for a minute what I'd seen. But you think to yourself, maybe if she'd have been driving faster, she would have blown the tire and so on. So maybe that saved her, that being cautious saved her. She went inside to her daughter-in-law's house. They sat and had a cup of tea. She was with another friend. They sat and had a cup of tea. It is England after all. That's what we do after a long journey. Unless you have a vodka tonic, of course. We have a cup of tea. So she had a cup of tea. And then the friend that she came with said, you know, we've been sitting in the car so long. She was with her boyfriend. She said, we're going to go out for a walk. Okay. Off they went for a walk, and less than 5 minutes later, I think it took them all of 2 or 3 seconds, they went outside and they came racing back in. And she said to my friend Joan, you've got to come out, you've got to come look at this. And there, parked by the side of the road, was Joan's car with a flat tire. I'd even told her which wheel. It wasn't as if when her husband and her son looked and checked the tires that they didn't know which tire. There it was. I mean, yeah, it's a weird thing, right? Right? Do you think that's weird, Al?
I think, you know, maybe people out there, not everyone has such clarity in things that have happened. Maybe they have, right? But what it does for me is it just reinforces the fact that there are a lot of preordained things in life. Even something sometimes, you know, when you meet somebody, I always say time sort of slows down when you meet somebody that you know is going to be an integral or important part of your life or impact your life in some way. Those kind of things I think happen to everyone, and it's your soul talking to you, but it's also letting you know that there are these paths ahead of you, good or bad, and if you have that positive attitude, right, you look at those as, okay, this is going to happen. This is my soul preparing me for something that's going to happen. Now I have control of how I react to what's going to happen.
And what your attitude is.
And
I had a client many years ago, actually. I'm going to say 30 years ago. I had this young woman who came to see me, she was married, and she'd been married for a little while, and they were trying for a baby, and she wanted to know, am I going to have a baby? And the next year and the next year and the next year, she came back and still no baby, still no baby. But every time I looked at her, every time she came for a consult, every time I saw Grey Eagle and spoke to Grey Eagle, I would see babies, not one, but plural babies, however many there might be, babies. And I'm going to say 5 or 6 years went by and no babies. To the point where this girl's mother called me one day screaming down the phone at me, telling me that that she wasn't very nice to me. She was saying that I was encouraging her daughter to believe that she was going to get pregnant. I was encouraging this nonsense, so on and so forth. It was disgraceful. All I wanted was the girl's money, so on and so forth. But she and I, this young girl, by this time, not quite so young, we had lots of discussions, and I would say to her, look, I can be wrong. And I always say that to everybody, just because I see it doesn't mean, that it's set in stone. I can be wrong, but I knew that I knew in my soul that this girl was going to have babies against all the odds. And she was actually told by the hospital no, and so on and so forth. Anyway, at some point, she stopped coming to see me I hadn't heard from her for about maybe a year or something. And I got home this particular day, and I sort of had like a big open carport. And I walked in, and there was the most enormous bouquet of flowers. And a note. It didn't say who it was from, but it said, you were right, and there are 3. And I'm thinking, who sent me this? And then, of course, I went into the house, and she called me straight away, and she was pregnant. She'd been, the reason I hadn't heard from her, I think, was because she'd been at the hospital and doing whatever she was doing. She had 3 sons. Now, there is a little added extra to this story because, well, first of all, her attitude was, she would say to me, but I believe you, Rosemary, I believe in you, and I'm going to put my faith in you, I'm going to believe in you. And her belief in me is what drove her to continue to try, against all the odds, I might say, to continue to try because she believed in me. I was concerned, I'm always concerned, I don't want to give people false hope. And I would say that to her, I don't want to give you false hope. And this is what her mother had accused me of doing. Years and years later, and I think it was just a few months ago, so we're looking 30-some years on, this lovely lady contacted me on Facebook, and she sent me an email, and she I don't know if you remember me, and she said, this is this lovely lady who's now, got 3, there were triplets, she had triplets, 3 30-year-olds, 3 30-year-old boys. She told me what they were doing and so on and so forth. But isn't that an amazing thing that, because of her positive attitude, and I know it could have worked out differently, but in this case, because of her positive attitude, she continued and she kept trying and she worked at it, and bingo. So our attitude towards the things that happen to us, our attitude towards, the stuff that life throws at us is makes all the difference in the world to how we continue and how we get the most out of our life, or how we get the least out of our life. I'm wondering, Al, if we have any comments. Do we actually have anybody listening to us today?
We do. We have a couple people that are writing things in different languages that we
don't understand you, but we'd love to, but we don't.
I'm not sure. I think maybe Italian, Spanish, some in here. We do have a question from, Karen's here. She said, hello, everyone.
Hi, darling.
So excited to join in. We loved having Karen as a guest.
Yeah.
We have Nettie, who signed up for the classes, she said, so that's exciting. And and Nettie also asks, does your soul have emotions? It's an interesting question too.
Does your soul have what?
Emotions.
Yes. Believe it or not, yes, because we are our soul is us. So our soul is striving to do the best for us, the most for us, bringing us light. Our soul needs nourishment. If we don't nourish our soul, the light dims. When we nourish our soul, the light increases. So that in itself shows the emotions of the soul. Great question, Nettie.
A really great question. Yeah.
She's going to make a good student by the sounds of it.
Yeah. So my question to you, as we're talking about sort of a recipe for this, how? Because to me, it seems like to really understand, the what is predestined and how you should react to it with a positive attitude. Everything is attitude. You really need to understand how to get in touch with your soul and listen to your soul, and what's the difference between just having a bad day or listening to your soul, or like, so what recipe would you give for people to make the best out of what life is giving them?
One of the ingredients has to be pay attention. You've got to pay attention. Listen to your inner self. Listen to your instincts. So listening is an important ingredient, and having listened, pay attention. I always apply the 3-time rule. If you hear something or you sense something or feel something once, accept it, but you only heard it once. If you hear it twice, pay attention. If you hear it a 3rd time, move forward on that feeling or on that instinct, and so on. I've always found the 3-time rule works very, very well. Another ingredient that we need is, we need a whole big pinch of trust here. Because I remember once saying to Grey Eagle, look, why do we have to have these traumas and these difficulties and so on? And I was applying it to a lovely woman in Hong Kong who lost her son very tragically. And I was sort of, kicking against it, I was berating, why, why does God have to do this to us, punish us in this way, and so on and so forth. And her story, one day I'll tell you her story, and I'll tell you what she was told by her grandmother in the spirit world. But Grey Eagle often says to me, and he said this to me when I was asking about Samantha, because I don't want Samantha to have hardships. I don't want her to have those hard lessons, those tough lessons. She's already had plenty, I might tell you. But he says to me still, and he's got his hand on my shoulder even as I'm talking about this, he says, if we were to smooth your path and leave no wrinkles, where would your learning process be? So we have to strive. We have to climb over those wrinkles, which sometimes seem not just wrinkles, they seem like mountains to us. So a big dose of trust, a big dose of listening, a big dose of the 3-time rule, paying attention to the 3-time rule. All of those things encourage us to retain, even in the most difficult circumstances, to retain somewhat of a positive attitude. And if I can just say this, for everybody out there who thinks a positive attitude means we're all out there smiling and happy and whoopee and all the rest of it, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about when I'm telling people to have a positive attitude, because very often maintaining a positive attitude requires tears and gritting your teeth and fighting for it and having to strive for it. And I remember many years ago, week after week, I was going through having no money. My husband had cleared off, and I'd drive to the healing centre, tears streaming down my face, and sort of, but when I got there, I grit my teeth and go in and get on with it, despite the fact that I was hurting inside. So having a positive attitude is forcing yourself sometimes, or being determined to overcome those traumas that you're going through in that moment and strive to be stronger. So Determination is another one of those ingredients, a good dose of determination. But please don't think, all of you out there, when we're talking about having a positive attitude, it means that you've got to smile every day, because who can possibly ever do that, right?
And Rosemary, we talk about the space in between, right? And you're talking about these challenges and these traumas that we have, and the growth that can come from them if you have a positive attitude. And that is one of our purposes, right, on this earth plane, to grow and to expand and to
we can't grow without experiences. Somebody actually once said to me, yes, but why are those we can grow equally with happy experience and good experiences as we can with painful experiences. But that's not actually quite true, because it's the painful experiences that actually affect us deep inside, and the painful experiences are the ones that we are most readily learning from, I think. Agreed.
And in fact, most people know my father passed away about a year and a half ago, and as painful as that was, it's forced me to not lean on him as much, to not depend on him as much, to become my own. I do it really kicking and screaming a lot of times, but it really, without that trauma, I don't know that I would have come out to Colorado or moved, or I don't know that I would have handled things and processed things internally like I have if I had him to lean on, or to talk to, or to help me through things, or be a crutch for me. Like, I don't know that would have happened if it wasn't for that trauma in my life.
And in one way, in a physical sense, when we lose someone like that, as close as you were to your father, and as close as, we had a lady on the show, I can't remember if it was this week or last week, who lost her son, and they were so close, and talked all the time and so on. So when you lose someone who is that close to you, it does feel as if on a physical level the crutch has been kicked from under you. There is no crutch anymore, and you can feel really lost and alone. If we can sort of hold on to the fact that on a physical level the crutch has been knocked away, but on a spiritual level that crutch is stronger than it ever was.
Enhanced, yep. Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about things that are preordained, and the examples that I've given have actually, this happened within a half an hour, and this one happened within 2 hours, and so on and so forth. And the baby thing, that happened within 5 years. But I've actually, and it's also amazing to me, I've actually seen things that have happened or that I know are going to happen 7 years on, 10 years on, even some longer than that. But I will tell you this, and this is very interesting. I can remember, you see, when you're not looking for it, it often hits you. When you're not actually listening too hard, because sometimes we try too hard to see those in the spirit world. We sort of try to force it, and we're never going to force it. But this particular day, I was actually doing laundry, and I got my head in the washing machine, sort of, pulling stuff out or whatever it was. And I heard Grey Eagle's voice as clear as a bell in my ear as my head is in the washer or the dryer or whatever it was. And he started talking to me about an airplane crash. There is an airplane crash. There's an airplane crash. It's going to be huge. And so on. And so I came away, sort of, finished doing the laundry, and I sat down and I started talking to him. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what can I do? Is there something I can do? Or can I make a call to prevent this? And he told me quite clearly no. And honestly, if I'd have made a call to the airline, and I didn't even know what the airline was at the time, but if I made a call to the news or the media or something to say, please check all the planes because there's going to be an air crash. I mean, who do you think would ever listen to me? Nobody would listen, right? So I knew that this was going to happen, this awful tragedy, which it did. And I felt completely helpless by it, because you do, when you told us, like when my daughter, I could see with the accident, and I felt totally helpless to do anything at all. And the only thing that sort of saves me with these situations is that I know that because they are preordained, whatever the outcome, it is what is meant to be. Anyway, I told my friends and I said, if anybody hears, or reads anything in the newspaper or what have you, just let me know. Well, it was the very next day. I don't know if you remember this, but it was a huge thing in England and around the world. There's a place called Lockerbie, and there was a Lockerbie air crash. And the plane went down, and I think all of the passengers and the crew were killed. And it's shocking because you know that it's going to happen, but there's nothing you can do about it. And that's, when I say to people about mediumship, people don't get it. Everybody wants to do what I do, but people don't get it because it's an extremely lonely and often very painful existence. Because I'm dealing with people all the time. Some people who are dying, some people who are sick, people who have lost their children, so on and so forth. And every time I talk to someone and every time I see these things, it's like I feel it. I don't just know it. I'm not just told about it. I feel the pain of these people, tremendously so sometimes. And you cannot ever share that. I'm sharing it with you. I'm telling you about it, but you don't get it. Nobody gets it because those situations and those feelings are for me alone. And unless you do what I do, nobody's ever going to understand you. So, and I remember my friend Mick Maguire, when I first began this work, saying to me, the life of a medium is a very, very lonely one because no one will ever truly understand you. And it's so right. He was so right. But having said that, I would never choose anything else because it might be lonely in so many ways and people don't understand you. It's true. But at the same time, the joy and the love that comes my way from people is just, it more than compensates for what I lose in some way. I'm not even sure if I lose anything, to be honest. I'm thinking, but anyway, I'm rambling. But that is my attitude. You see, I have this positive attitude. Yes, I'm lonely. Nobody understands me. I could sit here and weep, and nobody understands me. I'm all alone in the world, and so on and so forth. But no, because this is the most incredible and beautiful thing. And even though in that space in between, terrible things will happen to most of us, we will go through the pains and we will go through the hurts and we'll go through the heartaches and we'll go through the tears. But if your attitude, if you stay strong and you can strive to have that positive attitude, all of the joys and the wonder and the incredible things that happen to us in our lives, we will appreciate them so much more, I think. So that in-between space, if you can grit your teeth and determine that you're going to, think positive thoughts and have as positive an attitude as you possibly can, you will come through this and you'll be happier for it. I would say to anybody out there who sits, and you know who you are if you listen to me, who sits there bemoaning and bewailing and suffering because they had a terrible time, look to yourself. Don't look to everybody else. People blame other people. If it weren't for him and if it weren't for her, I'd be happy. No, if it weren't for you, come out of your own self. Get out of your own way. Stop blaming other people and look at you, because you can make a difference to your own life. And I think that's very important, and why we do this Everything is Attitude thing every week, to try and inspire people to take responsibility for their own selves. Stop blaming other people for what is happening to you. Stop blaming God. Things happen. We have to strive, because that's why we're here, to learn and to grow. But grit your teeth and fight to be positive, because it's worth it at the end of the day.
Human nature can inhibit you from doing great things and having a positive attitude, but it could also inspire and empower you too. Yes. It's all about those choices, right? It's all about either
All about
embrace.
attitude.
Yeah, it's all about embracing the positive human side and the
Yes.
power sort of that you have within, versus embracing the negative and the humanness of doubt and not trusting your soul and your instincts and all that piece, right?
Which we all go through, Al, don't we?
Oh,
We all have to deal with it, don't
it's
we?
waves, right? It's valleys and mountains. It's waves for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but but overall, what you see at the end of a year or end of 2 years or end of 3 years, that's really what it's about, right? What that looks like over
In
time.
retrospect, you can look back and you either, because we all do, it's, what is it? Hindsight is probably the best sight, but we don't have it, until we have it. But I think that when you look back, very often the traumas and the tragedies have turned out to be blessings. And I mean, even I have friends. In fact, I'm talking about Jeff, who's been on this show, and Andrea, and they lost their son very tragically in a very tragic situation. They have taken that. Nobody can change the pain, and they're still in, all these years later, they're still in pain and they're still suffering, and they still, have to every day have to fight to get on with their lives. But because their attitude is so, and they're lucky because they have each other, but because their attitude is so strong and powerful and positive, because they grit their teeth and they make it so. It's not something that just comes to them. It's not something that is born within them. They grit their teeth and make it so. Even that awful tragedy they've turned into, I mean, Jeff talks to people, he counsels people, he's amazing. And you turn that tragedy into, you can't change what happened, but you can certainly, if you grit your teeth, you can make something good come out of even the worst situation.
Excellent. We're close to time, Rosemary. But
any comments do we have?
We have Connie said no one could have a bad day when they tune into your shows.
Oh, that's nice.
And
Nobody dare have a bad day when they tune into us, right, Al?
exactly. Maggie said came in at the right time. She just got in. I was just having that roar of fear from a thought of my ex and felt the feeling. I am much stronger now, she says.
Oh,
so
brilliant. I'm glad you said
that. That human side can either take over and consume you, or it can empower you, right?
Yeah. Let it empower you. That's my last word on the subject. So to everyone out there who is listening live, or all of you who are going to watch later, thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for supporting us. And I'll thank you very much. My co-host, as usual, brilliant, and you have a lot of good stuff to say, and I think that you are very inspirational. You're the one who asks the questions, and everybody out there is thinking, oh yeah, I want to ask that, and I know that one. So you are the voice of those people out there who are listening, and I'm sort of trying to be the voice of the spirit world and trying to be the voice of Grey Eagle, doing my very best.
You do an amazing job at that too. Yes.
Sorry?
And I think you do an amazing job of that.
Well, yeah, so. Thank you. But anyway, so thank you, everyone. And thank you, Al. Until we see you again next week. Remember, we do have, just quickly tell you, we do have our Thursday morning show, which is live on YouTube every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Standard Eastern Time. We also, yes, you can actually now sign up for our classes, as Nettie did say, and thank you, Nettie. I look forward to chatting with you. Our classes start on March 14th, and you have to sign up if you want to join the classes. You have to sign up before then, at least a couple of days before then, because otherwise you won't get in. If you're not signed up and you haven't, given us your money and all that other stuff, and haven't filled out the forms and so on, you won't get in. So so if you want to do that, if you're not sure, you can email me, rosemary@rosemaryalte.com. You can email info@everythingisattitude.com. I know Al's going to put that up. Or what is the place that they go to? We did send out a link. So if you simply need the link, or if you already have the link, don't email me again, because Karen was complaining that 6 or 7 people have already sent the link and they're asking me again. Don't worry about it. If you're not sure, email me, rosemary@rosemaryltaylor.com. We'll send you the link. We'll put the link on Facebook also, right, Al? So people can get the link for that. So you need to sign up. And of course, next week we have our Everything is Attitude. As usual, we think we have a guest for next week, but I just love it when it's just us, Al. I don't know about anybody else, but I like it when it's just us. So that's all that's important to me right now.
We're learning and growing, right, Rosemary?
We certainly are, every day in every way. So until we see you, wherever we see you, please have a very, very, and even a very, very blessed day.